Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. I have read another of the books off this year's Booker long list. This time we've gone for Universality by Natasha Brown. Now Natasha Brown has been chosen, I think she's the chair of next year's International Booker Prize, so that is a big honour. And yeah, as far as I'm aware, this is her second novel. Although I say novel, it's quite short, so more of a novella, I would say. And it's the first time I've experienced her writing. So today I'm going to give you a little rundown of what I thought of Universality. I particularly love the cover of this one. I love how shiny it is. I love how it's got basically a tactile looking gold doubloon on the front of it, which is very relevant to the story. And I'm going to try and do it without any spoilers. If I do decide I want to delve a bit deeper into it, then I will flag that up long before so that you've got time to stop the video and go get a cup of tea or go and read the book. Universality is a very short book and it's a social commentary, but more than that, it's more of a social conversation starter. It's one of those books that doesn't give you the answers, but touches upon the zeitgeist and tries to open up the conversation while bringing several different points and voices across in the effort. Now, if you liked books like Yellowface, which is a searing critique of the publishing industry, this book is kind of in the same sort of vein as that kind of book. And as R.F. Kuang put it very, very well when she was speaking on the subject, Yellowface is a book where everybody's wrong, but in completely different ways. And that's what's interesting about it. It doesn't kind of tell you the answers. It brings all of the different kind of issues surrounding the story and uses fiction as a jumping off point and a way to explore the way we think about these things. So Yellowface is a particularly good book, and I'm not comparing Universality directly to it, but if you enjoyed it, it's a similar sort of thing. You've got satirical elements and using fiction as a way of exploring the cultural zeitgeist. Other books in the same vein, The List by Yomi Adegoke. This book was a fantastic exploration of accusations around violence and sexual violence toward women, and the way that there seems to be a kind of extrajudicial movement to find justice, because obviously the justice system doesn't always serve victims and survivors in the right way. Again, this book was another conversation opener, conversation starter that explores the subject using a fictional scenario, but the characters have their own beliefs and there's different angles to look at it from through the different characters' eyes. So Yellowface, The List, two books that do that quite well. Another book that does this quite well is a book by Kylie Reid, who is actually on this year's Booker panel. Kylie Reid, a fantastic debut with Such a Fun Age, and this one explores more racism and the ways in which racism can present in different ways. You've got some really problematic characters vying for the attention of the main character, who is a young black girl who just wants to be able to earn a living. She's babysitting a young white girl and is stopped. A kind of well-meaning but misinformed woman in the supermarket is worried and concerned, obviously, that the young girl is with someone who is not, not that she's not meant to be, and it's kind of alerting security, and then it all kind of escalates from there. So it uses this fictional scenario to look at the ways in which people interact with each other, the way that different characters respond, and it holds a mirror up to the real world. And Universality is one of the books that does that in a similar way. This is a completely different book, by the way. None of those issues are the same. It's just the similarity for me is the way that they explore the social world around us. And Universality starts with an expose piece by a young up-and-coming journalist who is new to the scene, and it opens with her piece. Now, this is the story of a chap who gets donked on the head with a gold bar. He survives the attack. That's not a spoiler. You find that out pretty soon. So apologies to anyone if I, when talking about this book previously, kind of build it as a murder mystery. It's not a murder mystery. The guy does survive the attack. The attack takes place during the pandemic at an illegal rave in Yorkshire, and the people who are living on the property are doing so without the owner's permission, or I think one of them has their permission and then they brought all their friends who then established a commune kind of situation there. This expose piece is about what happened after the assault. So a man gets hit over the head by a gold bar, solid gold bar, and then the person who is purportedly responsible for the attack then goes missing along with said bar, and it's about the journalist goes about uncovering what happened that night. After the expose piece, it unravels and spirals out. We have the point of view of various different people involved in what happened. So we have the owner of the gold bar, we've got the journalist in question who wrote it, and we've got various other characters who recur throughout the piece, and looking at their different circumstances and the things that they're wrestling with. And the key thing here is that not everything is as it initially seems. With Universality, we have a scathing critique of certain forms of journalism and the way in which the truth can be warped to suit the agendas of the people involved. That's something that's very kind of clear and that's very well done in this book. We get a very interesting look at the way that facts can be presented to the public to serve serve the agendas of various people involved. We also look at subjects such as class versus race. One of the prominent characters in Universality is very anti-woke and populist in their thinking. So the term woke just means awoken to the injustices, the systemic injustices in particular within the world, and it's kind of become a little bit of a buzzword in the conversation, and people are using it in a negative way, whereas what's being commonly referred to as wokeness is essentially people pointing out that certain groups of people are marginalised within society and are at a systemic disadvantage, whether that be because of race, class, gender identity, sexuality. There are lots of different characteristics that can affect things, and it's about recognising that inherent unfairness and basically increasing awareness and trying to counteract it. People are kind of kicking back against that being pointed out. So we've got a character here who is very much of the opinion that wokeness is something that's, a bad thing and, causing problems within society, etc., etc. So that's all part of the conversation. You've got the Universalists, who are the group of people who the title refers to, and they're on a small scale basically kicking back against capitalism, against what their perceived ills of the world, their perceived kind of ills are in society. But as it's pointed out, they're a very small group of mostly white people who are gathering to do that, and they're kind of seen as quite toothless when it comes to the impact that they're having on the wider world, whether they're actually whether they're actually making any big difference. So there's seen as problems in the same way. We're back to Kwong's way of looking at it, in that everybody's wrong in various different ways, or if not wrong, ineffective in some cases. We've got I'm gonna be straying into spoiler territory now, I think. So if you haven't read Universality, I think now is the time to perhaps stop the video. Very quick summary. I thought this book was a really good conversation starter. I didn't think there was enough meat in it to... I feel like I needed a bit more. I needed a bit more to get my teeth into. We do have some very good, almost like little short stories, character pieces, but they are very short and they're not very detailed, and we don't get very much, you know, it's very obvious what the author is trying to say with these character pieces, but they could do with a little bit more substance is what my thinking is. So I really enjoyed this book. I think it's one of those that would do well to have, I think it's one of those that would do well to have a second reading, because I think I'm going to see more in it if I read it again. The prose is very spare, the prose is very pared back, you know, it's not written in a particularly complicated way, it's very accessible, it's very concise, and all of that is a good thing, but I'd have appreciated a bit more commitment, a bit more commitment and a bit more bulk and a bit more meat. You know, really tell us what you really think, Natasha Brown. Don't just give us these openers. Tell us what you think. I would like to know what you think of your characters, and I feel a little bit of that's revealed, but it could do with a bit more. So, right, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this book in greater depth. So, otherwise I'll just be telling you the book. So, if you bye for now if you haven't read this, or if you don't want to hear anything further. I'll catch you at the next video. So yeah, so one of the characters that's seen in the original expose piece, I think his name's Richard or something, I'm not sure. He's the guy who owns a solid gold bar. It turns out this is not in fact a solid gold bar, it's a tacky gold painted block of base metal that he has on his mantelpiece, which does actually explain, you know, why it was left on his mantelpiece, because yeah, you wouldn't want to be leaving a doubloon lying in an unoccupied property. Turns out that although he is very much painted as the epitome of capitalism and greed, he's a banker, he's everything that the world would hold up as, you know, not being being part of the problem. But, you know, it turns out he's from a very working class background. His wife is from a more privileged background. There's, you know, a lot of what he does is making up for this inferiority, this feeling of inferiority that he has. So although he is a cheat, he is a cheat, he is and he is very much a banker. Who he's a bit of an apologist for the credit crunch and all the crises surrounding that, but it's perhaps a little bit more complicated than is initially made out, in terms of this guy's a villain, this person's not. And don't get me wrong, there are villains out there, there are lots of villains in the world. You know, it shows that things can be a little bit more nuanced than initially thought, in the same way that we've got the young journalist who is actually, and this so we have a really awkward dinner situation. So she's invited her friends, who basically ditched her when she didn't have any money, which, you need to get new friends. Like, those are not your friends, those are awful people. You do not want them in your life. So she sat there with the guy she used to have a crush on, and the kind of couple who are, you know, very materially successful. One of them is dabbling in eugenics. I don't know, like, why are you friends with these people? They're awful. So they're all sitting down having dinner, and she's basically talking about how difficult it is and how unlivable it is in modern day London if you are on your own, and it's a choice between making enough to be able to live off and being able to do any kind of satisfying work or self-actualization. It's just talking about how impossible it is to be able to, you know, support yourself and also have a life outside of that. So, and that obviously transcends, you know, there's people of all races, people of all backgrounds. If you're in that situation, you're stuck. It's difficult, very, very difficult. And that's the point. Universality doesn't give us the answers. It's a conversation opener. It's looking at all these different characters, all the different circumstances, and saying, you know, look, here are a load of problems. What do we do about them? How do we talk about them? Because a big theme of this book is about kind of diversity politics and inclusion and ways of addressing imbalance that way, versus also problematic systems of class that kind of oppress everybody. So we have so many interesting, for such a short book, we do get a lot of like I say, conversation starters. This book is a conversation starter predominantly, and one of the characters in this book is, I think his name's Martin. He is the one that the up-and-coming journalist has a crush on, goodness knows why. And he's going to be interviewing the main character, and probably the most kind of, I would say, if this book was to have a main character, the older journalist Lenny, who has, it seems, pulled strings and orchestrated the whole affair. She has been instrumental in helping the young journalist come up with this piece and present herself and all the other characters in a way that benefits her and benefits her agenda. And she is a populist writer who has controversial opinions that resonate with quite a good deal of the UK population. And one thing that I would say probably against Universality that isn't talked about enough is the role that race plays, because Lenny's opinions are very much that race isn't what matters, diversity isn't what matters, it's class that is what we need to be talking about. And I think if you've been in the same internet bubbles that I have, you'll already have quite a reasonable understanding of the impact that racism and systemic racism play within our society. But not every reader is necessarily going to have, they're not necessarily going to be aware of what all the arguments are. So personally, I would have liked a bit more of a counterbalance to Lenny's opinions. And, the person that she is in confrontation with at the end, Martin, is absolutely, like, he's one of the obnoxious friends of the younger journalist, who I still can't remember the name of. Apologies, I probably should have looked that up. She's referred to just as a plucky young journalist. Does she have a name? Does she have a name? I want to say Claire. The guy that she's in confrontation with is, he's not a shining example of someone someone who has opposite views. So I really do think that as a book that may be someone's first introduction to the subject, we could have done with a counterbalance to Lenny's opinions, because I mean, I'm reading it and I'm like, oh dear. Oh dear, I can see where, but somebody else reading it might not necessarily, not everyone has had the same conversations. So I think, a bit of a counterbalance, a few more viewpoints might have benefited the story. She has started working for The Guardian, which is usually a more liberal newspaper, but and it's talking about all the tactics and the ways in which journalists and newspapers play different sides off against each other in order to maximize profit. So we do get a lot of commentary on that within these pages. And she's a very controversial figure. She is, there are kind of personal reasons, because her son was the guy who did the donking with the bar, and he went into hiding, possibly having taken the bar with him. And it's a little bit complicated. You'll find all of that out when you read the book. It unravels in layers. It's like a spiral. Whereas, for example, other books on the long list, like Audition, they've very much got a distinct first part, second part. This one is like a spiral that reveals little bits as you go on. You think you know what's happened at the beginning. Then by the end, no one's got any answers, and you're just a bit miserable about the state of the world, really, and how everybody is manipulating everyone else for their own ends. So yes, I struggle with whether to give. I've given Universality 3 stars on my Goodreads, because I do think it needed a bit more in order for me to fully sell it. But as a kind of jumping off point, it's more of a 4-star book. And so perhaps I've been a little bit unfair there, because I am still thinking about it, and now I'm talking about it. Now I've got lots to say. I've got lots to think about. I would highly recommend reading it if you haven't already. I'm assuming if you're this far into the video, you probably have read it. If so, please tell me what you thought. What did you get out of this book? Because I imagine it's one of those books that because so many people have so many different ways of thinking about things. It's a good book club book. If you like the people at your book club, and it's not going to turn into a kind of a fight between everybody's different opinions. If you can sit down and have a conversation about it, you'll probably find that there's lots of interesting opinions with this one. The more I think about it, like initially I thought maybe it would make the shortlist. There's been a lot of buzz about it. I'm not so sure. It depends what else is on there. I have heard a lot more people talking about the books on the long list since I did my last video. And there are a few that I think might be in the running for winner. I don't think this one's going to win it. I wouldn't be surprised at all if it made the shortlist, because it is a big topic of conversation and it's one that I think will give you more returns on rereads. So, and also obviously Natasha Brown, a very acclaimed author at what seems like the start of her novelist career. So you don't necessarily have to be a huge chunky book to be of literary value. So yeah, Universality. Lots of interesting points, and I'd love to have a discussion with some of you about it. So yeah, if you've read this book, let me know what you thought and we'll go from there. I think I'll be thinking about it for a while. I think it's certainly given me lots of food for thought. Next up is probably going to be Endling. I've started that one already, so you will, if you're a subscriber, that will be probably pinging up on your screens, coming soon to a YouTube channel near you. I'll catch you all later. Bye for now.